Welcome back to the program. We are joined today by Einar Tangen, a fellow at the Teihe Institute and also a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation. So thank you for coming back on the program.
Well, it's always an honor, Glenn. I look forward to an interesting discussion.
Well, you are, among many other things, there in China, you're an expert on supply chain risks. And this is quite an important component when you're in the middle of an economic war. And we see that the US over the past years has gradually escalated this economic war, which Trump said would be easy to win. He's probably having second thoughts, but so far the main cases were cases of self-harm. That is, US companies were, for example, banned to export computer chips to China, and then they found out that this actually hurt their own sales. Then it impacts the research and development, and again, self-harm. But we seem to have entered a new phase now. That is the phase of the Chinese retaliation, in which China puts its own restrictions and sanctions on the US and Western countries. The most important thing would be the rare earth metals. I guess it would be more accurate to say they put export controls, because this isn't only directed against some specific countries, but the rare earth metals, they do seem to stand out in terms of importance. I mean, for us who are not up to our elbows in this every day, how can you explain why this is so important?
Okay, basically, there's nothing being made today in terms of high end technology that does not use rare earths. And if they don't use rare earths, they use very specialized metals that are also dominantly created in China. And there's also, just the goods themselves. I mean, the UNDP last week said that by 2030, they expect China to be 45% of the world's manufacturing. The United States will slip to number 11. I mean, to 11%. This gives you an idea that the world does not see Donald Trump's idea of reindustrializing the U.S. as serious. In fact, quite the opposite. It is now eroding U.S. Industrialization. So to the extent that you want to make weapons, missiles, anything that with a magnet or a chip, you need those rare earths. And China hasn't pulled this one out of the bag. I mean, what's surprising, Glenn, is that this has been known for years. And there's been a lot of talk about it. I've been following this for the last 8 years. In the beginning, it was kind of like, well, China's polluting their environment because they're involved in these rare earths. But they started developing the technology for processing. So when we're talking about this issue, really we're talking about processing. About only 70% of the rare earths are mined in China. 30% are outside. There are rare earths all over the place. In fact, if you go to iron ore mines, the tailings, the leftovers, can actually be mined quite efficiently for rare earth elements. But then the question is, what do you do with them? It's like having oil. Well, gee whiz, I think I need a oil processing plant, a cracker. So, and if you don't have that, you're not going to put that oil into your car or be able to use it in any kind of modern form. So this is where China really holds the edge. I've talked to industry experts. China is 10 to 15 years ahead of anybody. And this is an area, remember, we're talking about nanoscale, chips and things like this. And magnets have to be very, very pure. So this technology is not just something you can pick up off the shelf or you can read in a book. This is something that's been developed over a long period of time, and China has the upper hand, and they're now using it. And, the question for a lot of people is, well, why didn't they use it before? I mean, Donald Trump was extremely aggressive in his first term. He was even more aggressive now. Well, China felt in the first term, they were surprised by Trump. They felt that there were holes in their self-reliance, and they patched those holes to the best of they could. So they were ready for round two. And I think if you look at this, they haven't been throwing out their best cards on the table to begin with. They've been waiting, and this is part of this what I see is a slow playing of America. They know that Donald Trump's going to be there for another 3 years, 2 months. During that time, it's going to be pure havoc, what we've been experienced over the first 10 months. So at this point, they're just going to try to do what is necessary to keep things as stable as they can, given the situation. But they're in no hurry to make a big deal, nor are they, in a hurry to show their other cards, which are substantial as well.
Well, it's not just regular industrial production. A lot of this antimony, I think NATO will begin to discover over the next few weeks and months that they're quite important for military industrial production as well. And again, in the West, we're now not just fighting Russia. We've been, helping fighting the Palestinians. We've been fighting Iran. We might soon begin to fight, or at least the U.S., Venezuela. There's plans to perhaps in the future fight China. We might have to go back fight Yemen again. Syria might require more of our fighting. Lebanon appears to be going south as well. So there's no shortage of wars, which we're prepared to continue pursuing military solutions for. But if you want to fight wars, you need certain things like antimony, and it seems as if they're being not just dug up in China, but most importantly, the processing is in China as well. To what extent do you think China has the possibility to, I guess, not demilitarize, but limit some of the excessive war ambitions from Washington?
Well, they have a 10-year window, but as with suppressing China, that the U.S. trade war was aimed at containing China, actually made it stronger. And China has the same dilemma. If they press the rare earth issue, obviously tremendous amounts of effort will be put into it in terms of the United States and Europe in terms of developing it. And you already see Australia out there saying, "Oh, we have the rare earths." Question is, do they have the processing and the capability? And the answer is no. So, there's always a cost to these things in terms of, what if we do this, what happens thereafter? And this is where China's very different. Beijing is different from Washington. Washington goes ahead. There's absolutely no clue, as far as I can tell, of whether there's an end game. Whereas in Beijing, they're always looking at the end game. They're looking 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 years forward. And this kind of thinking puts them ahead. It's like playing chess. They're playing 10 moves ahead. Donald Trump is playing half ahead. It's not even clear that he knows what the next move is, given the catastrophes of those many taco moments. It's clear that he wants the sizzle. He likes the optics. He likes the big statement, but he isn't prepared to follow him up, as we know with healthcare. For 18 years, he said he's 2 weeks away from a new, better healthcare program than Obama. But what have we had so far? Absolutely nothing. And when asked just before he was the election last fall, he said, "Oh, gee, I have a framework of concepts." That doesn't sound like 2 weeks away. So this is something that is endemic to Donald Trump. It's not about the long-term plan. It's always about the moment and trying to capture it with some big message.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably good to be cautious about the economic sanctions and weaponizing supply chain, because the first rule I think of sanctions is if they are excessive and prolonged, then the country which are sanctioned would essentially learn to live without you. That is, they would develop self-sufficiency, diversify away. So the idea that you're gonna have this hammer hanging over your head, it's not gonna last. So it's probably a good idea not to go down that road and weaponize trade excessively, especially when you're a country that competes so well in the international markets. But again, if things escalate, they escalate. And you mentioned that China may have other cards to play. Is this in tech then, or is it in the industrial production? Is it finance, transportation corridors? How? What if I mean we might, if we go down that route, what might we see?
Well, do you have a little time? China holds a lot of U.S. treasuries, and they can do a significant amount of damage simply by saying, okay, you don't want to deal with us. We don't want to deal with you. Then let's get into basic materials. You could talk about shoes. Well, you can go for a while without shoes. But if you're talking about vitamins, all the precursors for medicines, that's made in China. I don't think that they're going to weaponize it in that way, but there's so many industrial processes where the chemicals are made here in China in volume, and not only by Chinese, they're also made by BASF. They have two massive multi-billion-dollar uh, chemical factories here, and basically they don't have any more chemical factories back in Germany. They closed them down because they're uncompetitive due to issues, the cost of energy and the cost of feedstock, because a lot of the gas and oil is actually used in the products. So they were going elsewhere. So if that is cut off, you're starting to see some real serious issues on a daily basis. No vitamins, shortages or increased cost of any kind of pharmaceuticals, anything that involves buying cleaning products for your home. All of a sudden, it either won't be there or will be very expensive. Then we get into metals. You start looking at graphite and gallium and a number of others. These are already under scrutiny. China has sent a soft warning to the United States that, look, this isn't all we have. Then we get into logistics. I mean, Chinese ships are all over the place. They are the dominant force in the world shipping today. If they say, okay, no more Chinese ships going to U.S. ports, this would increase the cost. There'd still be goods getting to the United States, but they'd have to go through intermediaries like Canada or Mexico or some other kind of place. So China has a tremendous number of arrows in its quiver. Washington apparently does not.
Yeah. Well, I've been looking at the same in terms of how China has been, well, like you said, plugging its holes or reducing its vulnerability then to sanctions by securing its own supply chains, but also acquired this, let's call it punching power by having a lot of areas where other countries, well, United States dependent on China, and it's very difficult to diversify. But if you're the United States and you would like to see countries decouple from China, I guess that's what you want to incentivize a bit for the world to see economic instruments of power. So they would then reduce trust in the Chinese-led supply chains. It's probably a wise idea to, again, not go down that road and weaponize trade, especially when the trade can be used for actually resolving political differences. So,
Well, let me just cut in there for a moment. Let us say, for instance, that the EU and BRICS came together and went to Washington and said, listen, Donald Trump, we don't care what tariffs you put on your own people, that's fine, but there's going to be a uniform tariff across the world. And if you don't do this, we're going to start tariffing your goods, and we're going to start taxing your the service economy, which is one of the few bright spots in terms of a surplus. Guess what? This helps Europe. Europe is the competitor. Europe is the one that can produce most of the things the United States can. So if the U.S. is at a disadvantage, that provides an advantage to Europe. Yes, prices would go up. But by doing this, the EU would be, in essence, be protecting itself and working with the global South vis-a-vis BRICS and the other entities that see that as their savior, as opposed to the UN, which seems deadlocked. So this could be a very powerful way of responding to what is, in essence, a bully. I don't think anybody likes the treatment that they're getting when they go to the White House. Most notably, we had Kevin Rudd the other day, who was lambasted for no apparent reason by Donald Trump. Everyone is afraid of that, and that's one of the issues coming up with this kind of meeting in Korea. Chinese do not want a situation where Donald Trump decides he wants to create a scene, do a Zelensky on Xi Jinping, in which case things become entirely very, very, very serious. This is where China is the adult in the room. They're not trying to set up something where things can go wrong. They're trying to make sure that they can manufacture something that's going right for at least as long as they possibly can. It's, you know, the Trump in the China shop, as we say.
Yeah, well, when Trump got elected back into office for his second term, there was a mood in Europe which was well reflected in the media that this time around we would stand up to the U.S. and we stood together, we would be respected. And I wasn't optimistic, but I thought this was a positive at least attitude, even though it's kind of obvious it wouldn't last. But the whole idea is if you have all these different centers of power, if you do diversify your economic partners, then you make yourself less vulnerable on only one, which is the United States. And at a time when the US wants to, I guess, corner the European markets and demand full political and economic loyalties, you don't want to go down that path because, yeah, well, then you're going to end up sitting like schoolboys in front of his desk being referring to him as daddy, and this is kind of where we're at now. But if you're the United States now and you see the world going into a multipolar distribution of power, it's not a bad idea to get the Europeans to commit themselves only to the United States, so create these exclusive blocks. When I say good, I mean for competitiveness with China, not for world peace, obviously. Uh, but the Europeans seem to be diligently going along this, and I guess the best recent case study would be the Europeans going after Nexperia, the Chinese chip maker who has its offices or headquarters in Netherlands. Now the Dutch government seized control over this Chinese company, and now we see again China responding. Again, it can't be bullied, so it responds. It limits exports and then we have the EU leaders stand up, warning that China is now weaponizing supply chains. I mean, this is the what you were just warning about, isn't it? Irrespective of what actually happened, and this was started out of nowhere by the Dutch government, or how do you assess this situation?
Well, I mean, the Dutch were leaned on by Washington. That's no secret. They admit it. The U.S. admits it. This is a power play by Donald Trump. He loves to use proxies. Use somebody else to go at his enemy. So I mean, this isn't new. But I mean, the European attitude is the same. I mean, when the daughter of going back to 2000. What is it, 11, Hillary Clinton, proposing this kind of pivot to Asia that was adopted by Obama. And then Trump comes along and he really doubles down on this. Remember, he seizes the daughter of the founder of Huawei while she's going through Canada. And he says openly that he's using her as a hostage in what he hopes will be, some sort of negotiation with China. Doesn't work out. She's released in the end after being there for 2.5 years. What did the EU say about that? Nothing. Crickets. If it had been the other way around, obviously they would said whenever China does something has a measured retaliation in defense of its interests, Europe rises up and said, "This is horrible. How can they possibly do this? This is outrageous." When the U.S. does even more. Remember, this is a tariff war that was started not by China, but by Donald Trump. 180 letters go out to including very confused penguins. And, where's Europe? Crickets again. I mean, they're divided. A few, say, "Oh, that's not nice," or something like that. They make a few gestures towards it, but then they go and sit in front of daddy, as you pointed out, and, like school children being told what to do. So the hypocrisy is there, but the real issue here is, when is the leadership in Europe going to change and start saying, look, we have to look after our own interests. We cannot be dependent on the U.S. because they're no longer a reliable ally. And they're proving this. They're saying, well, we're not going to defend you. Defend yourself. Start buying our equipment. Doesn't sound very reliable, does it? I mean, this is the kind of thing that it's just really hard when ASML stopped sending etching, the extreme X-ray lithography machines necessary to create high-end chips. Not a peep out of out of Europe. In fact, they said, "Oh, probably justified on security grounds," right? But when the tables are turned, all of a sudden, you get these massive outpourings of hypocrisy, a lot to appease Donald Trump. But, are they actually serving Europe? Europe desperately needs trade partners and needs markets. Right now, the United States is not being a friendly market, getting tariffed all over the place. They're being played against each other. It just doesn't seem rational that the EU isn't looking out for its own people.
Yeah, that's another thing I picked up as well. That is the outrage when not just China impose some sanctions, but when there are even counter sanctions. I mean, on one hand, it seems outrageous, but on the other hand, it shouldn't be that great of a surprise, because for the past few decades, the United States and the political West, well, primarily the United States, dominated tech, finance. The economic power was concentrated in the West. So for this reason, the principle of economic sanctions became almost exclusive prerogative of the West. And given that all economic sanctions, even though they're strategic in nature, would be legitimized by breach of liberal democratic values, this is why, we would use the sanctions. It seemed as natural and justified that it would only be the instrument used by the West. But now, of course, as the power has shifted, and also let's be honest, the United States is quite open now that this is not tied into, human rights abuses. They're very open now, saying we can't compete with China. We have to throw a wrench into the machinery. But still, you would think then that the outrage that China would also actually respond, it wouldn't be that strange, given that, well, it should be common sense, but it still persists, this moral indignation.
Hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there's still a vestige of colonialism, colonial attitudes in Europe. We see that evident all the time. I mean, look at France's reaction to the Sahels, these countries saying, enough, you've been cheating us long enough, you have to get out. What was the idea? Well, maybe we can go in there militarily and take them over again, right? So colonialism isn't dead, and it's definitely there. Colonial powers tend to stick together, thick or thin. We might have wars between us, but we cannot allow the yellow, brown, and blacks to rise up against us, because we are the masters. And this is really, really hard to take. I mean, this kind of superior attitude, which was based on a legacy of lies. I mean, you're talking in Africa, yeah, Asia, Middle East, all of these places that are denigrated as full of savages who don't know how to take care of themselves. The fact is, their civilizations are older, and while they were developing astronomy and medicine, in the West, they were wandering around in caves with bearskins. So, I mean, it's really a sad commentary on where we are today, that we are so blind to these things. And earlier we were discussing these false dichotomies, black and white thinking. You're either with me or against me. And there's no nuance. There's no discussion. I don't even have to have an end game. You're just either with me or against me. And this kind of thinking is, is just something that I really fear, because it's the fascist path. All right. They set these parameters. They set moral absolutes. They tell you that you're either with us or against us. And if you're against us, we're going to come for you. And that's exactly what's happening in the United States as we speak. all political enemies of Donald Trump are being, the U.S. Justice Department is being used against them for political purposes. People wandering the streets, ordinary people, some citizens, many of them aliens, are being seized by men, you know, riding up in black-clad vehicles, often unidentified, jumping out of cars and grabbing people. If this was happening in any other country, where Europe and America would be decrying this as human rights abuses, all these types of things, talking about the moral superiority of Western democracies and how this could never happen, Europe or America. It, Yet it is happening. And this is what I fear. This is the path to autocracy, the path to Donald Trump perhaps deciding that since he's going to lose the midterm elections, it's time to plot how he can maintain control by taking over using the military.
I often make the point that one of the great challenges of our time is to adjust from this unipolar order to multipolar. But one of the aspects would be what you're referring to, that is the rules, because once you have a unipolar world order, all power is concentrated one side, it's unrealistic that the rules will be the same. So you create what we call a rules-based international system where, we can interfere a bit, we can use military force, we can split up countries, we can do many things, but the other sides cannot. So this kind of makes sense. But it's also then, it should be rational that as the world moves into a multipolar system, our great challenge should be to have similar rules for everyone, because there's no reason anymore that one country like China would accept that a different set of rules should apply to it as opposed to the United States. And I'm thinking about, you mentioned Australia before. You can open any newspaper any day and you'll find some article saying, "Oh, how dare Russia suggest that the Ukraine can't do what it wants? It's a sovereign country." And then if you go to the next page, there's outrage that the Solomon Islands, for example, is growing closer to China. How dare they? This is, even if it's economic ties, but also security cooperation. It's the hypocrisy. You mentioned that word before, but that hypocrisy kind of it's built in and makes sense in the unipolar system. That if one side gets to dictate the rules, then it will. But you have to accept the world as it is. It's not going to work anymore, and I think it's becoming a very painful transition if we pretend that the multipolar world isn't here yet.
Well, that's one of the conundrums that China has faced. How do you transition to a multipolar world? I mean, you've heard about these 4 initiatives that have gone, the security initiative, no country security. Every country has to be secure, is entitled to be secure, but their security cannot rely on the insecurity of other countries. Makes sense. Otherwise, you're always going to have wars, right? Second, every country has to have its own path determined by it to prosperity, and no country has the right to deprive it of that. That would make sense. People want to have a better life. The third one is the global civilization initiative, which is really about respect, not only respecting the autonomy of the countries, but look, around the world today, countries are, in most cases, an accident of either royal families or partitions by colonial powers. They were drawn up rationally. They didn't say everybody in this group over here and that group over there. There was, in fact, cynically, a lot of countries in Africa and Asia were drawn up so that you had a minority in charge of a majority. Why? Because then they were dependent on their colonial former masters to support them. So the civilization initiative says, look, we have to accept countries the way they are, and we need to learn about each other. We have to respect the fact that they have multiple languages, multiple histories, religions, beliefs, songs, you name it. I understand that. But there's a silver lining to this, and that is, the more you know about a country, the easier it is to do business with them. If you have things that they want, or they or vice versa, all of a sudden you have trade. And trade has been a very, very valuable way of countries pulling themselves up, as China did, out of the doldrums of, not having anything to trying to make a life for their people. And the last one is global governance initiative. This is the idea that we really have to come together on a multipolar basis, and to say, look, we have to treat each other equally. There has to be some basic ways of handling strife other than armed conflict. And, I think these are wonderful aspirational things. I hope that they could be adopted by the world because they're not ideological. No one's telling you what to do, saying that we all have aspirations. Gee whiz, I think everyone can accept that. So at this point, you have on one side China pushing this kind of global system for the benefit of all, and then you have the United States. The system exists for the benefit of the United States, and then perhaps something will trickle down to the rest of you. I don't really believe that anyone outside the United States or even within, I think this is just a fantasy that elites in Washington have inherited it from the British, who inherited it from the French, inherited it from the Spanish, who inherited it from the Romans, and you can get Greeks, and you go back all the way along. There's always these dreams of the forever empire and how it's going to continue, and how everyone is going to pay fealty to one idea or one ideology or one king. Those days have gone. If we want a modern world, we have to start adopting to more modern ways. And a lot of that has to do with accepting each other, which unfortunately seems in short supply these days.
Well, the principle you refer to, the indivisible security, this was kind of common sense. This is how you overcome the international anarchy and the security competition. But we also saw over the past 30 years that it became incompatible with a unipolar system. That is, if you want a hegemonic peace, that's the exact opposite to indivisible security. Then you have peace by one side dominating so much that it doesn't matter if other feels insecure. This is again, but that's what I meant. We kind of have to go back to some common rules which actually reflects the current distribution of power. I did want to ask though. You mentioned before that the United States loves the use of proxies, and this also we see now with the Europeans as they the Americans, they don't want to steal the Russian assets because they know they will become a financial pariah in the international system. But they're very happy for the Europeans to do it because, again, it would be they wouldn't bear any of the cost. And so, but this is something that I hear from speaking to some people in India, that it spooked the Indians a bit because God knows where it goes. But how about in China? How do they see this precedent? Because uh, this excessive belief in their own morals means that they don't really, they assume that the world outside the NATO blob will also see the legitimacy and the virtue in this, that they're taxing an aggressor to give to the victim. This is and it can't be applied anywhere else. Everything is unique, like Kosovo. But how does China assess this, the theft of, legalizing the theft of Russian assets?
Well, it's hypocrisy. If you want to follow the logical consequences, then Europe should return all the money that it stole from all the colonies that it had. I don't see them rushing to do that.
But is China taking any measures to protect its
Yeah.
finances?
Oh, absolutely. But a lot of what China sees is it doesn't matter what Europe does. They're undermining the global this idea that I can trade any. They're going to say, okay, I have to defend myself. And if you think India is nervous, look at the Middle East, right? Heard directly from our representatives there that they are not. They're not saying it's a possibility. They're saying it's a probability. And they're doing everything necessary to diversify their holdings. It doesn't mean they're getting rid of everything they have in the US and Europe. It's too large. But they are definitely diversifying and balancing their holdings so they don't lose everything if for some reason Europe or America decides they're on the wrong side of the line and it's time to take what you know they have. Remember, colonialism was all about taking, right? I mean, it was just unabashed. We could just come to your country, declare you savages, and take over. So, I mean, this is not new behavior. What is different is that Europe started preaching this idea that it was superior because it had a superior system based on an ideology of free markets and the socialism and democracy, things like this. Well, what do we see? It was all a facade. It only applies when they want to preach, doesn't apply when the rules are actually put in. So in terms of China, yes, they're doing it. They're keeping the minimal amount of US dollars that is necessary to have, basically trade. They don't want to be buying and selling yuan all the time. They're also working with other countries on alternatives to settlement. A lot of their trade now is they're pushing this idea of using local currencies to avoid US dollar, which, frankly, as I said, China sees the US undermining itself. This idea that it can keep the trade dollar strong and at the apex at the same time, it's devaluing it by 20 or 30% seems absolutely inane. And then adding all sorts of borrowing on top of that, on top of the $37 trillion that's sitting out there. They just say, look, this is not sustainable. This latest idea of the stable coin, all right, is just a way of manufacturing artificial demand for treasuries. Because the stable coin is not a coin, it's US treasuries. They buy them and then, they issue these coins. But guess what? If those treasuries go down by 30% because of the devaluation of the dollar, those coins are worth less, right? So while you're providing a market for US treasuries, you're actually allowing the US to do exactly as it wants. And at some point, the piper has to be paid. And when that happens, you're going to see a massive fall in the dollar, in the whole economic system of the world. And this is exactly not just China, but every country that I've talked to in Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, Middle East, and the stands. They say it's the same thing. We have to be prepared for the day when the dollar dumps.
Yeah, well, given that an economic crisis, a big one, appears to be coming all around the corner, it's reasonable to suspect that the rules of the past will no longer apply, and I'm expecting that there will be more different, but still more moral arguments for why the assets of other countries will have to be seized. So I guess this diversification makes sense. I just had one final question on the topic, because you did mention that many see the US as undermining itself, and well, it's hard to ignore this fact now, but there's this comment that I've heard many places that Trump can almost now be referred to as Comrade Trump, given that he's unifying China as not before, as never before. How do they see some of this, though? In China, the way that Trump is behaving, is it dispelling former illusions, or?
Sorry, you might hear a little noise in the background there. Apparently, somebody's doing remodeling at my house. Hope it's not too annoying. In any event, yes, Trump, the Manchurian candidate. Many people in China actually who do not like the United States are saying that they want 4 more years of Trump after this term. They see him as the crisis that's going to bring the United States down to reality. And I cannot argue with them on that. I've said many times before on this show, the United States only changes when it's forced to. That means that you have to hit a crisis that's so bad that the only way to get out of it is to go up. So at this point, the United States is fast approaching that point. You take in the tsunami that will be caused by these stable coins, by the debt, by this kind of profligate tariffing hitting individuals in America extremely hard. You have bankruptcies in the Farm Belt that voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. You have people who are, DoorDash salesmen who are regretting the fact that they put their trust in him. He has not paid attention to their things. He's running around the world, begging for a Nobel Peace Prize, and what they want is a president who's taking care of prices. So, yeah, at this point, China is sitting back. They're trying to be the adult in the room. They're trying to prepare for the inevitable fall, but it's not something they wish for. Remember, this will be extremely painful for China and the rest of the world. And how do you ease it? If somebody's running off a cliff, if you can't prevent them from doing it, you have to prepare for what happens after they jumped off. And unfortunately, when Trump leads America off that cliff, the rest of the world is going to have to figure out how to get along. And right now they're doing it. You've seen what happened to gold, although there was a 5% drop off recently. I don't know exactly why, but at this point, people are hedging. They're looking for this. It's one of the reasons that China stresses food security. Why? Because if you have complete chaos outside in the outside world, people are going to need to eat. They're willing to sacrifice a lot of things. They don't need to go to football games or movies, but they do need to eat water, sewer. They need the basics of, organized community life. So this is what China is concentrating on as it kind of views, hopefully, that the U.S. won't jump off the cliff, but preparing for the worst if it does.
Yeah, this is the most disappointing thing in this economic war. That is the lack of planning I often see around. That is, if you want to take down your competitor a peg or two, I mean, show me the objective, how you're going to achieve this objective, the risks, something. But you only see this bombastic language, and any critical assessment will be seen as casting doubt upon it. And, initially yeah, trader. And I thought, as a big fan of Hamilton and List, I'm not opposed to the idea of tariffs as a way of maturing some infant industries, for example. But when you see Trump coming along threatening Spain with tariffs because they're not spending enough on military, you kind of ask. I don't remember reading this in Alexander Hamilton's work. So we're entering a very strange period of time, but.
Well, it's even worse, 50% on Brazil because they won't free his convicted felon friend, Bolsonaro. I don't recall that was something that was in the playbook back when they developed the Constitution either.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. It's, I think, this economic war, it's not gonna, that's the only way we go, apparently, these days, to double down. It doesn't appear to go away anytime soon. So, yeah, we will be keeping an eye on it. So, by the way, a final question is, where can people find you?
Find me? Okay, on Asia Narrative Substack. I lead a group called the 15-5, which is the 15th five-year plan is in motion, and a lot of people want to know about that. We have a group that does very high-level risk assessment strategies for that. And then I'm also at the Center for International Governance Innovation, which is in Canada. They did pioneering work on the G7, G20. I think, unfortunately, that they're going to have to start thinking of a new grouping or morphing some of these groups into something that is reasonable and effective. Right now, the G20 is not, but, and neither is the UN. So we're going to see increased regionalism and things like that. So that's where I am. I'm based in Beijing. I've been here for 20 years. I'm an American citizen, and I was born in Washington, D.C. So unfortunately, I know a little bit about what I speak.
Fair enough. Thanks again.
Thank you, Glenn.